Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Laura Davis. She's won the Comedy Channel Moosehead Award, Melbourne International Comedy Festival Golden Gibbo Award, and Melbourne Fringe Best Comedy. She's appeared on stand-up shows on SBS and ABC TV, and she's currently a writer on Sean McAuliffe's show Mad as Hell. Welcome, Laura.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you doing this. I've had multiple people tell me you need to talk to Laura. So
that's good.
Yes.
that's a good rumor to get around.
It's a good thing. So I'll start off by asking you, Laura, if you weren't working as a comedian, you weren't writing and performing stand-up, what would you be doing?
See, that's always an interesting question because I feel like there are two options for the answer, which is what were you going into when you changed paths, and what would you probably choose now if you gave up? I feel like you get the two options. So
I'll give you both.
Yeah, when I was studying professional writing. So I did want to be a writer, but probably would have ended up moving into teaching English or something. And I did want to be a journalist, sort of a writer, but I think it was more the creative elements that I was pursuing. So I'm not sure I would have been happy in that.
Even nowadays, there's less money in journalism than in comedy.
Yeah, the degree that I was doing wasn't particularly good either. I think that I actually made a great decision in failing. Not many people can say like dropping out of a degree was a great career choice,
yes.
But I think for me, I was maybe in a slightly outdated.
Were they teaching you how to be a newspaper reporter?
Yeah, pretty much.
That happens these days. These old professors
universities
who never change their approach.
I think I was in a real bad degree. Now, if I quit, I'd probably like to go maybe study psychology and move into youth work or something afterwards. I'd probably go do that with all of my life experience to find things that you might.
And what's the probability you'll quit?
I feel like I can't conceive of it at the moment. I turned 30 in a few days, and I've been performing since I was 19.
Okay.
And it's one of those, those blinker situations where you you focus at a light at the end of the tunnel for just long enough that you can't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I would, unless it started to make me desperately unhappy or stop interesting me, then I would have to just continue in some form.
Okay. So you're saying you might downshift to a hobby, or
I guess you. There's a wonderful thing that you can do in Australia, which is to have quite a high-profile career whilst being desperately poor.
Yes, I know.
That's you can work as much as you want, you just won't get paid.
This is actually just saw a tweet today about some conversation. I think it was. I wish I could remember, but talking about paying comedians, and I think in the United States it's a real problem.
Yes.
Because and I understand why it exists.
Yes.
I still don't think it's okay.
Why do you think it exists?
Well, because the act of practicing comedy is so closely related to the act of performing comedy that people are so desperate to practice that they'll work for free. And so the willingness, also, there's a little bit of a commoditization of comedy. There's lots of people willing to do it.
Yes.
They're all sort of alike. I kind of joke that especially all these guys, they just seem they're the same thing.
I'm getting lost amongst them now. It feels like you're being deliberately, snide or something to say, but
I'm not saying
I can't tell them apart sometimes.
No, I'm not. I'm lamenting it. Actually, I'm not trying to be mean.
I feel like that sort of that isolates a lot of the labor issues with it. I feel there's also a fundamental flaw in the stand-up model where, compared to other art forms, if you are performing stand-up as well as you can, if you are the best stand-up comedian in the world, it should look like you are doing absolutely nothing. It should look completely effortless, like you're just having a chat with the crowd. And that's why people become even more reluctant to pay people who are professionals, who have reached a certain standard of work.
Because they make it look easy.
And they don't need to do it for end, but you make it look like if you look like you were doing as much work as you were doing on stage while you're on stage, people would...
Yeah, that's true. Like if you're a jazz musician or if you're an athlete.
Yeah, people go, oh my goodness, I could never do that. Whereas stand-up, if you're doing it as well as it can be done, everyone in the crowd should feel like they could have a crack.
And also, we've all had moments in time when we're really funny, whether it be at a dinner party or something like that, where you're just on. And so you have those moments that exist. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's not just the labor issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I also think that like the model of selling it, right? This idea of selling food and drink, right? You wouldn't do this at a symphony where you come to the symphony, you have to order at least 3 martinis, that kind of thing. Or
quickly get out there and see 3 symphonies that have all been made to fit under an hour in a quick symphony festival.
Yeah. Yeah, it is indeed.
You're meant to go home and think about that symphony. Just one.
So how are you combating this? Like, so you said you're already feeling a little bit commoditized.
I like to talk on stage about how hard I'm working and how good I am and how nobody would be able to do it if they tried. Just really rub that in.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just working around it. You can sort of get different work on the side. You start turning down work, I think, to work on other projects is something that I've only just come to the luxury point in my career where I can do that. Like before, doing stand-up and practicing it was very important in just being able to do it.
Sure, yes.
Whereas I feel like, not to rest on laurels, but I feel like after 10 years, the gaps that I can take and the things I don't need to do 7 shows very quickly, pack 4 into one night or something to just run something in. I feel like particularly in the smaller Australian market, you can sort of work on stuff with a little bit more focus and time on it.
Yeah, actually that's come up with some of my prior guests where they say, you have to be a little bit careful about working too much in Australia. Just because there's fewer audience members.
They'll see you.
They'll see you, and then they'll see you again, and they'll see you doing the same stuff again, and they'll be disappointed by that. Yeah,
it's an interesting difference in Australia. One thing that I really calmed me down when I was getting really nervous about going to Edinburgh last year was a friend of mine said that because Australia produces some really great comedians on a worldwide level, sort of, and because the industry is smaller, but the place that you hold in the industry here, whatever level you've reached, is sort of where you will slot in elsewhere, because we do have it's a small scene which does foster quite a high standard. And so if you can do 20 minutes here, you're not going to go to England and people go, oh, this is the worst 20 minutes I've ever seen.
Then that's right. Then if you're doing 20 minutes in Topeka, Kansas,
So even though you maybe spend less time on stage, the progression is sometimes a little bit faster here because there are less, footholds in the industry.
And Australians are funnier.
Hopefully.
I think they are, actually. I think actually the average Australian has a lot more practice being funny in life in general.
Yeah.
And thus the comedians have a head start.
Yeah, I haven't travelled maybe enough to notice it, but it would make sense, kind of the society that we built out of, prisoners in an incredibly harsh environment.
Yes, that's rather
well, it's one of those ones where a lot of historically, a lot of sort of the social mores and traditions slipped a bit quicker here than they would have elsewhere because, you couldn't, you couldn't get around in very fancy Victorian clothes for much longer than we did here.
And comedy actually plays on breaking rules, so. But you're writing now. So
Yes.
You're a comedy writer.
Yes.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, wait, hold on, before I go into this, because I'm eager to talk to you about this. I've experienced the same thing as doing, like, public academic work. Mm-hmm. So I get invited to give talks.
Oh, yes.
And it's very flattering. But it's challenging. Giving a public talk is hard in the same way that getting up and performing stand-up is difficult.
It takes you away from your family, your friends,
Yes, and it's it's one more thing to prep, and it's I think on the scale of things that are valued by a university, it's kind of mid to low. There's other things that are much more valued and rewarded, and so I'm finding myself in this interesting world where I want to say yes because I want the practice,
yes,
and I believe like the stuff I have to say is important and useful. But then countered by are you going to make it worth it for me to do this? And so I'm not quite there yet where I'm just saying no without pay. I mean, obviously, academic talks, university talks, I always say yes to, and they're always pro bono. That's just the norms. But outside of that, in the public and business and so on. It's a similar kind of
that sounds very similar to the business model that we work
so
around.
You guys are dealing with in that same way. Okay, sorry, but so you're a writer. So I've always said, at least when it comes to like New York, LA, this like that comedy world, that those writer gigs are like the best job.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you why I think they're the best job.
All right.
You tell me if you think. So one is it's steady work.
Yes.
It's stimulating work.
Yes.
It's kind of regular hours. And it's also...
It's usually well paid.
Yeah, it pays surprisingly well because often writers have good unions. At least they do in the United States. The Writers Guild is a pretty strong union.
Well, they had that big strike.
They did.
They did a great job. Great job on that strike, guys.
Well, talk about showing you have value. It's not like you could call in scabs for writers, Like, it's a hard job.
They try sometimes.
But you get what you're going to...
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. And then also the other one is that you can keep a low profile.
Yes.
And so if you don't want to if you want to enjoy a good life, a stimulating life, a creative life, an artistic life, but you don't want to have to deal with the fame.
Yes.
That's seems to be a nice way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does allow you to strike a balance too. Like this is just contract work for me at the moment. So we do maybe 2 seasons a year. So, and they're 3-month seasons. And so for me, knowing that I have steady work for that 3 months makes me a hell of a lot more flippant with the other 9.
Yeah.
Because I know that I can come and work and I know that I am getting experience and I'm building a resume and a profile and I'm not, I'm still gigging most nights afterwards and I'm still working on all my own projects because it is such a short-term sort of contract work. But yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people can move really comfortably into is writing narrative comedy or writing sketches. And then, you do get to really enjoy a lot of the times people that I don't think that it is true for me. I really like the live performance. It's probably my favorite part of being a stand-up is live work. But some people sort of go into stand-up and comedy in general because they like the creative element, they like the writing, they like generating the material and then sort of drag themselves excruciatingly to gigs completely outside of their personal
the Mitch
comfort zone.
It's the Mitch Hedberg style of comedy.
Yeah, the sort of people who actually don't like public speaking and don't want to be on stage, but they're doing it because they feel like that's the format that you get and then you get to sort of work creatively in and then you give people an outlet where they get to do whatever they want, but they actually don't have to, drag themselves up on stage in a bar at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be asleep at 11 o'clock at night. So for the listeners, will you describe what a writer's room is like? What is that scene?
Yeah, well, I guess there's so many different types. I've worked where we had like a little room, maybe about this big, with 5 guys in it, and me, that's about the ratio.
Yeah, if you're lucky, right?
If you're lucky. And what we did was, it was a very short contract. We just wrote the plot line and pitch for a TV series. And that was very sort of, we'll go get coffee and we'll have a think about this, and then we'll have a chat about this, and okay, and this character should do this. And that was sort of, I feel like...
you writing this on whiteboards?
Yeah, on whiteboards. That felt like the most sort of, that stereotype of what stand-up writing is and comedy writing is. It's, one big table and everyone's singing across. And then you get coffee and then you do some more singing. That was probably the closest to it.
Did you like that?
I did. I really enjoyed it. What I'm writing at the moment on is Sean McAuliffe's Mad as Hell. It's a political news show.
Okay.
And there's a few political news shows in Australia. I know some others have a lot more fun in their writer's room. Okay. Because we can hear them through the door at ABC. And, you walk past one room, they're laughing and, dancing around. And ours seems to be, just by the nature of the show and the nature of the people who work on it, just quite... Like, I have a cubicle almost, we have a little... So there's 4 of us, 5 sometimes around the corner, and we just... you're allowed to stand up and talk and everything, but you do just sort of put your head down, and it's a really great show. It's a really well-respected show, and a lot of that, I think...
What would you compare that show to, like, for a political news show in the U.S.? Do you know? Oh, there's a parallel? Just
maybe. So it's a maybe you can tell me, I'll describe it. So it's headed as a desk show, but it also involves, your sketch actors. So there's a team of them. We have 4 key actors who play all the characters for the sketches. So in that sort of Saturday Night Live sort of a style, but not quite.
So it'll cut to a scene.
Yeah, and we'll do it's sort of a fake news show format. That's quite a common one.
So Jon Stewart's show used to have Samantha Bee will have actors out as serving as news reporters.
Yeah, exactly.
Or something like that.
So you write a fake news report for somebody to do. Okay. You write a desk interview for somebody to come in. But we do have, we have our stable team of 4 performers that do all of the characters in different wigs and makeup and everything. So it's one of those interesting things where, because the writing goes through like this interesting, it's like a sausage process, like it's a very writer-driven show. We write what we want. We're not told what to write on. You might write on the same topic as somebody else, and then they take a Frankenstein of whatever 2 scripts they get, and then they all sort of get tweaked maybe or rewritten a little bit by Sean, and then they go through the actors. So then at the end of product, it's sort of been filtered through. Right. It's all driven by the writers writing what they would like, and then filtered through sort of this moderating voice of somebody who tweaks the scripts to suit themselves. And so then at the end, it's this one nice cohesive. So
it sounds like Sean speaking instead of speaking.
Exactly. Like, you write for somebody else's voice as much as you can, but I think that's what makes the show really great, is the fact that it does go through those sort of sifting layers.
Yeah, that's great. Now, so back to your poor writing training.
Yes.
Is there anything that you learned in that program that helps you now as a writer for the show?
Absolutely. I think even just sort of attaining a really high standard of English was incredibly useful, to know how to write reports and how to write statistics up and how to, just the very basic.
Yeah, I guess they taught you to be a news thing, and now
exactly.
Now you're on a
it helps
on a fake news show.
It helps so much, and they sort of, it's sort of a joke thing that people talk about humanities degrees and everything, but they do teach critical thinking, and they do teach bias, and they do teach,
communication skills.
Yeah, different ways and the way that different technology and different media platforms affect the content of something. And so I think stuff like that, is really important to have learned. So I think that would have helped me. I still have a massive student loan debt to repay for it if I ever earn enough money to have to pay it back.
I see. Okay. Oh, is that how that works? So
mostly you have to be earning over
above some threshold, and then you start paying. Yeah, the U.S. should do that. So, okay, so you come in, you sit down in your cubicle Monday morning.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? So tomorrow, you'll get up, you'll go to your cubicle, you'll sit down.
Yep, usually I stop in for a coffee at the cafe near my house to read the newspapers before I go in, so I'm sort of briefed on what's happened.
Okay, what newspapers are you reading?
So just the ones the cafe has, which is the Herald Sun and the Age, so it's the Murdoch and the Fairfax, I think.
Okay. Not the Australian?
No, they don't buy that one in. That's sort of the most right wing one that we have here, and it is available in all states, but it's not
popular at your coffee shop.
No, it's not a coffee shop. It's not a coffee shop newspaper because it's fucking huge.
I've seen it. It's big. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's got the sort of muscle that you would expect people holding extreme right-wing views to feel entitled to take up that much space at a coffee shop. It's like the man-spreading
of newspapers.
Yeah, I don't believe in climate change, and I deserve 4 seats. There we go. I'm walking myself on the bus.
Okay, so that makes sense. You
maybe that's what the left needs is bigger publications.
Bigger newspaper, bigger, more print. So you read this stuff, you get your delicious Melbourne coffee, right? Obviously everybody in this city reads about their own coffee.
We're very proud of it.
And then you head in.
And I sit at my desk, I say hello to the people that I work with, and then I sit at a computer for 8 to 10 hours, depending on how focused I am. And you just write script. You might send off 3 or 4, and then maybe 1 or 2 make it to record.
Okay. And you send them as you finish. Are you working on 3 or 4 of these simultaneously? You work on them sequentially?
It just depends what's coming in. If you get stuck, you go back and look and see what else is happening. See if something else, and because sometimes it's just a really short script. It's a one-liner on something,
but maybe in a monologue or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then other times you're writing a full, 4 or 5 page breakdown with different scenes and different actors and costume requirements, and then that might take the full afternoon.
And are you trying to get this thing perfect? And you send it off like, this is the best I can do. Without, spending.
If I could say that to him when I send off the scripts, I think I would feel a lot better about my job if I could hand them over while saying, this is the best I can do. I feel like that's what we all...
I didn't know, it could be half fleshed out,
because it's written on a weekly basis, and the actors have to have their lines ahead of schedule, everything has to sort of... And it still has to be relevant, so you can't submit anything that would still require somebody to spend 4 hours editing it, because it's just not worth.
And so ads are done, you send them off?
Yeah, you print them out, you put them in a little box.
So it's on paper?
Yeah, and you email a digital copy as well. But I think
like you have an inbox.
We have an inbox. Yeah, I guess if you were editing a lot of scripts, having them printed out and being able to scribble on them sort of helps a bit.
So have you had, this is fascinating to me, obviously, why I'm asking. I'm ignoring all my other questions on my list to ask you about this. Stop looking at my...
I can't even read them upside down.
So have you ever submitted something and it doesn't go, and then and then you go back and go, no, but really, I think you're missing an opportunity.
No, I would never have the moxie. I don't think anybody does. Sean is so incredibly well respected in the industry, and so you would absolutely trust his judgment on your own shitty work you're sending in. Every now and then something won't go up, and you might
Do you get notes? Do you ever get notes like, well, what didn't you like about this?
Very, very rarely.
Okay.
I think you sort of, it's one of those ones where you know what you did, or you can take it sometimes completely impersonal. You know, somebody else might have just written a better sketch on the same topic.
Right.
I would say out of 10 scripts that I submit, maybe one will make it to the show.
Okay.
And so that's not actually and our show is a bit different in the writing room. So this is a very different model to, I think, what a lot of people.
Yes, right.
It's where it feels like it's the fish John West rejects sort of a situation.
I'm not familiar with this.
It's like there's an advertising slogan for John West fish in the 90s, I think, and the slogan was, "It's the fish that John West rejects that makes John West the best."
Okay.
That slogan. So it feels like we work through a pipeline where there is more produced than we need.
Yes.
And they select
the best,
and they select what they want. And I know some people write on new shows where they are desperately, particularly if you're doing like a daily, television show, you are, and maybe you're not doing full sketches, so it doesn't take up the time. If you're doing it every night, you sort of, I know people work in those rooms where they're sort of under the pressure to just have content and, okay, we need another 20 minutes. So you need to write something on this, you need to write something on this, and you need to write something on this. And I think it's one of the things that makes this particular show such a luxury and lovely to write on, is that you sort of are there to supplement as best you can. And, you get stuff up and we all feel really proud because we know how hard it was to
indeed
work on it.
So it's almost, it has a strange parallel to stand-up in a way, in the sense that you write jokes, you perform them. Most of them, the audience really doesn't respond well to.
Yes.
Right? And then you keep the good ones.
Yeah.
Without the multiple revisions.
Yeah. And then after 10 years, you get better at doing it on the first time.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I feel that's something that's really nice about being 10 years in, and, 10 years and it's not that long in the industry, which I think a lot of people don't realize. I was, one of the best pieces of advice I was given when I started was straight off the bat, somebody said, it's a 10-year apprenticeship.
Yes.
Like it's 10 years to, I think someone said like 5 years to find your voice, and then 10 years to refine it. 5 more to refine it. And then at 10 years, just sort of, that's when you can start selling the product. And yeah, I mean, I was 19 when I heard that, like 20, and that's, I think, really helped me because I sort of was able to go, okay, well, when I am 30, I will have 10 years experience and I'll be able to choose what I want to do with the product that I've built. But one thing I've really enjoyed after having more experience is maybe not having to try out new stuff with as much trepidation. I feel like when I'm writing now for myself, I sort of know what will work and where it will work. And then, it's becoming rarer that I will go and try new material and have it just go over to tumbleweeds. You usually go, okay, that was half finished. All right, now I work on that. And that's been a really nice development.
Yeah, that sounds great.
When you start, it's so brutal to just, you take exactly that and 10 jokes up and one works. Right. And then you walk away, you're all right, what was it about that one that made that one work? Well, I want to see if I can write 10 more like it, and you try that and then maybe 2 work. Right. And then you just
Laura Davis's jokes are so good because of the ones that she doesn't
Well, yeah, exactly.
Now, and last question, I think, about your writing. So you sit down in your cubicle. You've got these stories swirling in your head. You've got your blank computer screen.
Script template.
And then, so how do you do this? Like, do you have like sort of a trick, a strategy, some tactic, a way that you go about trying to get, to get something that feels good?
It's just the same as you would get any idea. I feel like a lot of stand-up works on sort of the same ground principles, and there's lots of different interpretations of them. But, to make an idea funny, you have to find the premise. To find the premise, you need to exaggerate something, or you flip it, or you take it down a few notches and see, it's usually very simple. It's somebody sort of saying something awful in a really sort of cavalier, happy fashion, or it's somebody saying, it's all based on juxtaposition. And so once you know what you have, you have a news article about something that's happened in Parliament, and then you find the juxtaposition, or you can find the irony in it, or you can find the hypocrisy in it, or you can extrapolate it to its most ridiculous outcome when, the government is knocking on everybody's doors for this ridiculous reason. And, I feel like you get into trouble just across the board with comedy, whether it's writing for yourself on stage or for somebody else, if you go around looking for what is funny.
Okay.
That's where you get wanking jokes and mother-in-law jokes and all that.
Hacky.
Well, yeah, you sort of go like, oh, what is funny? It's far more productive to find something that isn't funny at all and work out what it takes to get something in that. And so, you don't want to joke about, terror control and all sorts of things like that, just because it's not funny if you just are talking about it. But if you can sort of flip it and change it and find a sympathetic viewpoint, that
the analogous situation.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been watching. I don't watch a lot of stand up anymore, part because I find so much of it hacky and predictable and so on. But if someone's quite good, I'll watch it because I know that they're going to do something fresh. And I was, Chris Rock has a new comedy special, Tambourine. And I admittedly like Chris Rock. I've liked him.
You're allowed to like Chris Rock.
Yeah.
I won't tell him.
And, and I was and what I like to do is sort of pay attention to what he's doing, why he's doing it, how he's doing it. And so, for instance, just finding the thing that's ridiculous. So he was talking about whenever there's like a shooting, police shooting, people say, oh, there's just a few bad apples. It's just a few police who are doing this. And then he does a bit about bad apples. Like, I've had a bad apple. Okay. And then he goes, well, but that doesn't exist in other important things. So he talks about, well, the airlines are like, well, there's a few, pilots, there's a few bad apples. He's like, there's just some jobs that you have to be perfect, right?
You can't have bad apples.
You can't have bad apples. And it ends up being a very funny bit. It seems like that is an example.
Yeah, exactly.
How would you describe that when you think about your technique? It seems like he's taking that to its natural.
Yeah, exactly.
End,
it's essentially you can hang somebody on their own rope. If once there is that, if you can spot something as being unstable position, an untenable stance to take,
lacking the logic.
Well, and then you go, okay, well, following your logic, this is where we end up, and it's it's the same as you would write an academic essay or something like that. One thing we've been writing a whole heap on, The Nation has, is we have the Deputy Prime Minister cheated on his wife.
I saw that.
It's all been a big mess, and he's having a child with his new partner, and all of that would sort of be fine.
Okay.
Except for about 6 months ago, he aggressively campaigned against same-sex marriage because it would erode normal family values.
Yes, right.
And children would grow up in same-sex families, and they wouldn't have, a stable house to live in. Right. And then, he comes out as saying things like, oh, well, it's making me upset that my family's under scrutiny, and I don't like that my child seems to be thought of as less worthy than other children. Because you go, oh, well, but this guy also fought they overturned a rule by going through the Statistics Commission in Australia rather than an electoral commission. And so if you held the plebiscite, the postal survey for same-sex marriage through the electoral rule, thing, the electoral thing.
Thingy.
Yeah, the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission, you have laws here that say you're not allowed to lie. You're not allowed to present false data. You're not allowed to, you're allowed to sway as much as you can, but you can't outright lie. Okay. Because they deliberately chose to go through Statistics Commission, you're allowed to, it's a survey now. They called it a survey, they didn't call it a referendum. Okay. And so then people were able to publish deliberately misleading television campaigns that say, children who grow up in same-sex homes are more likely to suffer domestic violence or something. You go, well, that's an outright lie, but it's being shown at primetime television.
More lax standards.
Well, there's just no law against it, and they knew that, and he fought to have it through, and then so on a comedy situation,
it's gold.
It's great, and you just can't. And you feel a responsibility if the newspapers are choked, and if it is very hard to get a lot of, particularly because of the way that they are legislating different laws for journalists, different laws for restriction of information and everything, and then it always feels like the Mary Poppins sort of spoonful of sugar situation, and this sort of political reporting that is, very close with comedy, your Jon Stewart's and your, all your shows that feature somebody at a desk giving you the news.
Yes.
So much of that is sort of, it's a really modern style of news reporting that, yes, it is a comedy program, but, you wouldn't watch Trevor Noah and think, oh, well, that's just a bit of light entertainment, you wouldn't.
It's heavy entertainment.
Well, yeah, it is. And it's heavier. You're not watching John Oliver going, oh, that's a funny little take on.
It's not like old Benny Hill sketches.
No, and so many of those comes out of a team of writers going, okay, this is why this is fucked. This is maybe how they could fix it. This is how we make that information palatable to a group of people watching it at home.
Yeah, I have a terrible memory, so I can't give credit where credit's due, but in the current political climate in the United States, this sort of rise of comics, the writer was saying is the comics are great bullshit detectors. Right? They're very, so I like to say that what comics typically do is point out what's wrong with the world. Right? So that's, right, it's very rare that a comedy bit comes from what's right with the world. Yeah. Right? It's very
almost
difficult.
Impossible.
It's almost impossible to do. And so now you might use that as a technique where you take something wrong and then flip it to try to talk about how it might be right and to try to create. But in general, you start with what's wrong, and there isn't this need to kind of create some balance, for instance, right? So if 90% of people don't like this thing and 10% of people do, you don't bring two people on, one who likes and one who doesn't, that makes the world seem like that.
It feels like if you can have a reality television star as your president, then the comedians can probably have the news. That's
that's an interesting. That's a nice joke.
Well, it feels like.
Is that a joke of yours?
No, but it's
a good premise for a joke.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's that thing where people are like, oh, well, we don't have journalists anymore. Well, you don't have
politicians
anymore. What are you meant to do if we're moving towards a populist society in that way? Then what hope do you have of you can't report on something that ridiculous?
Yeah, it is.
In a calm, non-biased way, and so,
hence the name Mad as Hell.
Well, yeah, exactly, and it's an interesting sort of again, you're always... they did some psychological surveys on comedians at one point, and I don't know the validity of, the controls they used or anything, but they found that comedians were very interested in, scale and, status and value sort of things. It feels like there's a particular type of, just very quick analysis of looking at something and seeing where the inequality in it, and quite interested in power dynamics and not in a sociopathic way, but I feel like
looking for tensions.
Yeah, I feel like comics are very good at finding where that tension is, and that sort of bullshit detector of going, no, that's not right, is not necessarily to me, I call bullshit, this is all silly, but just being able to say, oh, that's actually not stable, that's, and it feels like it's that type of mind that is very well applied to particularly political comedy.
Yeah, I agree.
Say, oh, actually, this doesn't match up with that, and it's not something that you didn't have to study, you didn't have to go through the annals of information, you just went, oh, no, that's not what you said there because of this. And
if you're paying attention, it's easy to pick out inconsistencies.
Yeah.
Especially and politicians do this all the time, where they hide their true intentions, right?
Yeah.
So they're not really. All right, so I want to hit you with some faster questions along the way. Do you have an unpopular opinion or opinions? Unpopular opinions.
Unpopular ones. It's one of those ones again, in that tension of, to a lot of people, I'm absolutely a monster.
Okay. So then, yes, you do.
But then, it's people who disagree, and that's valid in some points. But I don't feel like I hold anything that is completely unreasonable. But I had some people in my show the other night, like my hour show at a festival, who came in, and I deliberately take a very high status persona from the very outset of my show. So as I always start on stage, I welcome people in, go, hello, yep, sit down, yep, all right, good. And then I start from just ridiculous high status of, all right, well, who's seen me before? Yep, good. If you haven't seen me before, don't worry, I'm very good. I'm probably better than most of the ones you've seen before, especially you don't look like you've seen anything good for a while. And like you sort of, and I do that mostly deliberately because it unsettles anybody who can't cope with the idea of somebody who looks like me in that role. And it sort of bubbled up very quickly the other night, where there were two couples, and the guys were very uncomfortable with young lady being like, all right, you need to stop talking over the top of me, it's not fair, it's not a special rule I've made up, that's enough from you. And eventually they ended up walking out whilst coming up on stage to kick my chair holding my water into the crowd, like
really?
hit
Wow.
the audience, like furious. All that I had done for that show was say, no, sorry, you're not allowed to talk. And I'm sorry, I know that you think that you can, but you can't. And that was enough. That would be unpopular to a lot of people. I think the idea that
persona.
That persona, I feel is probably my most tense.
And then you bring it down as the...
Yeah, well, I'm very vulnerable and it's sort of, it is that juxtaposition and then finding that balance. I'm very vulnerable on stage. I talk about a lot of personal things, and if I can't balance that with some, sort of ballast, essentially, then I will end up looking very, very fragile on stage, and people don't want to see that. People don't.
They don't. They don't. I think people don't. And I'm stealing this from an earlier interview. Like, people don't want to see you working out stuff on stage, but they're happy to have you talk about yourself on stage. There's like an interesting balance there, where like you're not doing therapy, where you're using them, you're entertaining them.
But I have jokes that about mental health, or they're about breakups, or they're about politics or something, and people don't want to go there, but you have to take them, and to do that you need to have implied some sort of strength in, I feel.
I see.
I don't want to be all fun and silly and never mind, I won't hurt you. Oh, by the way, now we're going into some dark, scary territory by sort of showing them that I'm capable and strong and in charge of the room. Then they're like, oh, I guess we'll follow you into the abyss. Yeah, that's sort of... and to sort of play with... It's, it happens quite a lot. It's usually men will start talking at the start of the show over the top of me. As I do a setup, they will try and intercept with a punchline or something, and they can't quite cope. And it's just because I've gone very high status at the start that they've sort of gone, oh, we'll see about that, love. We'll see, And then go, no, I'll ruin you.
Right.
I'll ruin your whole night. You'll never leave the house again. And you need to know how...
I have the microphone.
Yeah, you need to, but also, you need to you've made a lot of assumptions about how jolly I am. You know.
Yeah, I think that crowds have the heckler. I think typically has no idea how much experience
it's the same
a stand-up
voice
has dealing with hecklers.
I had my favorite moment that sums that up. I did a show 3 years ago now. It was called Marco Polo, and I performed it blindfolded for several seasons.
Okay.
So for the whole show, I don't take a blindfold off, and it's a lot of crowd work.
Okay.
It's a lot of questions, and it was sort of a dramatic device to illustrate how similar people are and that thing of not judging the way that people look, and the fact that I was able to control a room and do crowd work whilst not being able to see any single person.
Yeah, that's neat.
But there was one guy who was heckling. I sort of shut him down, and then he did what most of them do, which is come back 20, 30 minutes later to prove that you didn't win.
Okay.
They'll give it 20 minutes, 30 minutes to have a good old think about what they're going to interject with next. And he did it again, and I can't see him at all, and I haven't looked at anybody this whole show. And I said, just a round of applause if this is a white man in his mid to late 40s wearing a T-shirt and a shit jacket. And the whole room just erupted in applause. They're like, he is. And, I'm guessing. I know I can hear him. He's male. I can guess the age room. I can guess the ethnicity. And then, it's autumn. He's probably wearing a jacket. And, the shit jacket is speculative. So it's all cheating.
Right. Any jacket is likely to be shit.
But that thing of just going, I've dealt with you. I've dealt with every other version of you. Okay. You're all the same to me. I don't even have to look at you to know. And they go, I thought I was special.
Does this make you earlier you were talking about if you were to leave comedy, other jobs you would do and so on. Mm-hmm. Is that the kind of stuff that it might wear on you and eventually
I feel like it's always been one of my favorite parts. The harder parts were when I was younger and going into what were dangerous situations physically, being in bars late at night, being in environments which aren't great safe working environments for women, but it feels like the more I do it, the easier it is to deal with and the more fun I have with it. The actual combat on stage has always been fine. Okay. Yeah, I'm really up for it. That's sort of because I feel like I'm quite good at making the point. I feel like I know strongly why people do things, and I always have in life. I've known people's motivations for it, and so when that happens on stage, it's sort of the least. I know what my jokes are. I know how they go. I don't need to hear them again. I'm pretty happy to stop and pick you apart and work out exactly why
I guess it's like
you're having a go at me, because there's no good reason for you to be. No one's calling out with something great and valid for a good, positive reason. So if you can just assess why they did that, why they chose to call out, it's usually paints them in a pretty ill light, and I think it does show.
Does it get a audience on your side?
Oh, usually,
they laugh harder after
absolutely.
those kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it certainly raises the tension level.
Raises the tension. I quite often get people to leave. I'm a big kicker-outer of people because I don't know, I feel like it's a hallmark of maybe my style. I'm very no-nonsense. I feel like I make good work. It's just a matter of respect. If you're willing to sit there and listen and enjoy it, you're very welcome to, but you're not allowed to affect that for other people. Yeah. And it's quite often I'll give them the maths of it, I pay this much for the venue, I pay this much for the registration, I pay this much, everyone in this room has paid this much, you've paid $21, so you feel like you're entitled to sit there and do whatever you want, but actually we've got about $2,000 collective collateral against you. And they go, I've never realised that. Yeah. Well, you can sit and be quiet or you can leave because I'm working.
Right, that's good.
And it's very high status, but also it's not I don't loiter on it. I'm not patting myself on the back for being incredible or anything. It's just, these are the rules. This is how you would respect anybody. And if you can't do that to me, then off you go.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool. Two more questions. What are you reading, watching, or listening to that's really good, that really stands out to you?
I feel like I restrict a lot of media, and that's maybe...
Well, tell me more about
that's
that.
maybe
I
one
care
of the
more about that.
It's one of the weirder personality traits. I listen to a lot of classical music that I don't know the composers of.
Okay.
It just plays in the background, and I watch a lot of documentaries about the ocean.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm quite sensitive to things. I find it very hard to find television programs and movies and books even that I don't find sort of overstimulating. Actually, something I was watching with my friend is the new Queer Eye on Netflix.
I watched a couple episodes.
Phenomenal television. They've really
upped the human interest part of it.
They've also really pinned the zeitgeist.
What do you mean?
It's such a interesting unpicking of sort of like different versions of these sort of masculinities that don't serve people well and can really cripple and cause people to really struggle in their lives, and to sort of gently pick that apart and air that out whilst being completely irreverent and, candy-coated reality television is fascinating. There was one episode that does have a stand-up comic on it, and they come in and help, and it's one of those ones where you go through and go, oh, that's needed, and the sort of men living out in the country who just go, oh, I'm just ugly and no one can ever love me.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, and they go, but what if they did?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's such an interesting, it feels like when you're making work, trying to find that balance of tension between what you enjoy making, what people will want to watch, and what is needed at the time is really interesting. It's where you get people like John Oliver and Jon Stewart and Trevor Noah coming in. Like, that is clearly needed at the moment. Like, society is wanting that. And then, I feel like that's a really good example of some production company that's really hit the nail on the head of going, okay, I think people would love to watch this right now in February 2018. All right, quick go.
I was sort of fussing around on Netflix and watching some of these stand-up specials. And it's interesting because I've been thinking about getting rid of my Netflix subscription, in part because it's just overwhelming, and it didn't feel like anything was really standing out to me that I wanted to watch. And I watched a couple episodes of Queer Eye, and I was struck by it too. I was struck by it in two ways, and maybe it's actually just reminiscent of what you just said. But first of all, I thought they did a very nice job of casting the subjects.
Yes.
So they found guys who have, I would say that there's how do I think of the right word about them? That at first blush, they seem like a stereotype, but then when you dig deeper, you find real depth in them.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the other one is, I felt like the makeover was as psychological as much as it was physical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like the original show was physical. Let's tidy you up and send you out in that world. And this
Go get the women.
Yeah, that's right. And this one is more like, no, you are a good person. Or it's what is it that you want?
Yeah,
out
what's
of life?
holding you back?
What's holding you back?
Is a really interesting thing. And I think a show that is sort of teases that out is very interesting at the moment, when you do have this sort of culture of people wanting to be right. People either really doubling down on hardline views, or they're sort of trying to make sure that they're on the right side of history, and then they're on the, a show that really starts to unpick that is fascinating for it to come along right now, of what's holding you back, and why do you hate these people, and why do you not like this, and why wouldn't you have...
Yeah, what's holding your change back?
Yeah,
why
exactly.
are you in the same place as you were 10 years ago?
Yeah.
I'm actually going to go back to one of my earlier questions then. We're going to go a little long, which is, what have you changed your mind about recently? Because that's a perfect... This Queer Eye idea is, I think, related to that.
What have I changed my mind about? Sorry, it's such a thinking question.
I know, and I don't prep. I never prep guests, so
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you ask questions like that, I could have changed my mind on what I've changed my mind on several times on the walk here.
Or what are you debating then? That might be another way to say it.
I feel like what I'm debating is the efficiency and the use of sort of this current call-out culture and the swirling vortex of the digital left is something that is really difficult at the moment. I got in the pond the other day. A reviewer had reviewed a female act show in Perth and it was a lovely review. She'd hedged in the review, I know this is bad to say, but I would normally not go and see female comedians because they always talk about man-hating and periods.
Okay.
And then went on to say, but this act completely changed.
Didn't talk about
she was great. She didn't talk about any of that.
Right.
And it was one of those ones where I really wrestled with, is it absolutely worth trying to educate her? Like essentially, are you allowed to just walk away and let people be a bit shit? If they're not murdering people, can you just go, oh, well, you're a bit racist. All right, I can't. Or, you really hate women. And then you go, no, but this means so much to change these ideas. And I did end up tweeting through a thread where I just said, hi, I noticed you said this. I thought you might like a handy list of all of the female acts that you're disregarding based on their gender. And I tagged about 100 female acts in under
Show
it.
don't tell.
Yeah, straight under. They'd be like, just these ones. And then but I didn't want it to just be like, yeah, fuck you.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I finished it up with what I hope was fair was, anyway, I don't have time to list the hundreds of other acts you've disrespected. But if it's okay, I said it's okay actually to hold a prejudiced view, but when you're publicly airing it in a forum that is designed to review female acts and affect their financial income,
yes,
at least have a look. Like I said, don't change that view. You can keep it, but at least have a look at it. Like at least look at who you're damaging when you say things like this. And I feel like that's as where I'm really wrestling is trying to find that line of, no, it's all right for you to disagree with me, but why don't you have a look at this? You're allowed to say that, or these people are terrible or something, who don't like this because of this, because they're all like this. But do you want to just have a look first?
Yeah. Well, the tough thing, right, is this person probably was speaking honestly.
Yeah, and not hurting anybody really, but also embodying what so many female acts are terrified of, which is, so often we get reviewers coming to the show on a free ticket that we pay for their seat.
Yes.
They come in, they don't pay. Then they go, well, at least it's free because normally I hate. Yeah. I would never go, people who would never.
Right.
I don't mind if you don't go see comedy or you don't, people always complain about reviewers coming in they're just a gardening editor being farmed out for comedy festival and they don't know anything about comedy. I'm actually fine if you don't know anything about the arts because it would be ideal if you did, but if you don't, that's all right because a lot of people coming in to watch me are also at that level of experience. So I'm interested in your viewpoint. But if you come in saying, normally I hate female comics.
Right.
But I guess I'll see this one because I have to for work.
Yeah. And I'm pleasantly surprised then.
But then I still don't feel like I've gotten a fair review out of you because I still feel like you walked in going, all right, here we go. And that's not, most of my ticket holders will have looked at my face and made a decision that they're happy to hear it talk. Whereas you've sort of been strong-armed into it somehow.
Yeah, and the belief ends up being self-fulfilling. If you believe that this is the type of comedy you're going to get, and so you don't go, you never get exposed in a way that you start to realize the great breadth and depth of performance that can exist.
Yeah, I guess what I'm maybe not changing my mind on, but oscillating between viewpoints is, how much social responsibility you should take upon yourself to step in the world, Like I saw some women on the street sort of taking photos and laughing at a homeless person who was sleeping rough, and I stepped in and I told them they can't do that. And like that to me feels like, yeah, you absolutely do that. And then other people you say that to and they're like, just let it happen. And you just, it's all fucked and you can't help it. And, you know, they're not going to change. And it's not so much that I feel, you know, that I wouldn't do it or something, but it's certainly, it's starting to feel like the depth of what we're currently trying to unpick all of a sudden too. Like we've sort of, feels like we've floated along for a long time with a lot of deeply prejudiced beliefs ingrained in society. And suddenly after 10 years of having social media and digital communications, we're sort of seeing different perspectives all of a sudden become global. You know, one individual's perspective as a civilian in a wartime environment is suddenly able to be broadcast to millions of people. And we never had that technology before. And now we're sort of working out what we do. Now that we are privy to the millions and millions of people's individual lives, it suddenly becomes, it's just this incredible tangle. And it was always that, but we just didn't have the communication tools to actually understand it.
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with I'm largely off social media with the exception of Twitter. And I like Twitter at the very beginning, and I still largely like it, but it's changed. And I don't know exactly what to do with it. It's become really politicized in a way in the last year or so, I think, especially. And
since some sort of inauguration.
Yeah, it's just and I just haven't made up my mind yet about that. And does it serve the purpose that I want it to, and how, and so on? I think that's it's a healthy debate.
Yes, I think so.
Even if it's just internal.
Yeah, it feels like it's something that is so overwhelming that's really the only hesitation in there is, you know, if I spend a whole day trying to unpick something online, should I maybe have just gone out to the park or like seen some friends, or like what other good could I have done that would have been more important?
I mean, for me, I'd rather do what we've just done, spend an hour chatting, than half that time on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I just find these conversations move my mind in ways that I find myself replaying in the ensuing days and weeks. Okay, last question.
I'm ready.
Secret to success. Everybody knows, but can't seem to do.
Value yourself and your time. I feel like one thing that I'm quite grateful for is I'm very nice and very friendly, but I'm quite I feel like I'm quite stern.
But you can be.
Yeah, and I feel like it's success-wise. Maybe I hold myself back by not saying yes to everything. Maybe I don't. You know, maybe there are, you know, meetings or something that I could have been in if I had been a more gregarious being or something. But the incredible sort of power and weight that you hold, I find some of people, exactly what we talked about at the start of the interview, people calling up sort of going, so I'd like you to come and do this for free and it'll take you 2 days and it'll be all great, or, you know, this is good and will be lots of exposure, and you're able to genuinely say, no, so you have to make it worth my while. And they go, well, we'll give you $100. And you go, no, I genuinely don't want to do this. Like I'm home. I've got my classical music playing and a documentary on Wales. Like, now what? What are you going to do?
How can you beat that?
Yeah, like, what are you going to do to get me? And they're like, we'll give you $500. Yeah, okay, thank you. That's how much I will accept for this.
I'll press pause.
Well, yeah, I feel like people think that they have to do stuff, and that just doing is as valid as doing good quality. It's like or just the act of it is very important. Whereas I feel like, if you would like to be very successful, saying yes to lots of opportunities is important, but just as much as sort of choosing and knowing what you're worth and knowing what just not being annoyed is worth money. Like somebody sometimes will ask me to do an editing job and, I don't not need $100 or I don't not need this much, but also is that money worth me being annoyed by this other person's work for 3 days? Like, I'm going to be slightly irritated by this for 3 days. And then you sort of choose. Yeah.
Yeah, you're valuing yourself over.
Yeah. And going, oh, well, if I do this, I won't be able to do this and this and this. And so what are those experiences worth as well? Whereas I feel like people sort of chuck up their time with, just anything in the hope that it helps in some sort of greater scheme. But
do you have a good way to say no to things?
Sometimes if they've been, depends how they've approached me. Again, can be very irascible of just going, oh no, I'm unable to do it because of these fake excuses, or sometimes just go, oh no, that just doesn't. I feel like sometimes it can be an educating moment, again, picking how much you go into with people, but to say, no, I think that's really exploitative. I had one theatre company call me up a year ago. I lost my temper at them. I didn't yell. I just sent a very, very stern email, politely worded, because they asked me to come and perform for free for their fundraiser to their theatre show, which they were charging tickets.
I see.
To. So to sort of have other artists come in and say, oh yeah, we're just going to do a comedy gala because we'd like a fundraiser for our theatre production, which we will absolutely be doing for money. So if you guys could come in and work for free so that we can make some money, that would be good. And you go, wait, I don't...
I know math.
It's only female. We're doing a female comedy gala because we want to empower women. I'm like, how are you empowering women by not paying us so that you can do your shitty play? And I did spell that out for them in, the polite language. I think just.
Well, Laura, thank you for doing my podcast.
Thanks for having me. No worries.
I don't pay any guests.
No, but it's a very interesting conversation. And it was a lovely chat to come and have.
Yes, this was great. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr. Peter McGraw next week for another fun, fascinating conversation on I'm Not Joking.
Yo.